And I don't care how good you are with a gun or a knife or your hands or whatever. The risk of dying in the fight's always more than zero.
Where the kicks at? Where the pains? Where the holes? Where the throws? You know what I'm saying?
And while they were here, they always wore masks to avoid
serious illness, hospitalizations, and death. Please, just get the damn vaccine.
I hope that nobody thinks that I make these videos because I believe that I'm perfect. No, I make these videos because I know I'm not perfect. And I cannot cover everything that I really wish I could cover in a martial arts class. When I'm teaching at my classes, I'm too busy taking you through techniques to really harp on and stress how you're going to apply it in the real world. One way you're going to apply your martial arts in the real world, if you want to stay out of jail, is to know when and how to apply what. So that's why what I do is I go to other sources. One source I go to, I've talked about a lot, is Mark McYoung, to learn how to, to remind myself how people that I may have to fight or defend myself against think. And a newer source is attorney Andrew Branca. Now, he covers use of force law, usually with firearms. But since there is a deadly force component to it, I'm looking at what he says with firearms and extrapolating that towards empty hand techniques. Now, I know that's not necessarily a direct correlation, but I do think that if you end up seriously injuring or killing someone with the martial arts, you might be judged similarly to how someone would be judged if they have a gun, especially depending upon, let's say, certain demographics that could be involved. I'll put it like that. So this latest video from Andrew Branca, that I'm going to just select some clips from, I can use by fair use internet, shows the gist of what I want you to learn when it comes to using the appropriate amount of force with your martial arts techniques. So let's take a look at that.
So, but anyway, this woman intervened in an apparent shoplifting event, and now she finds herself looking at a 10 to 20-year felony conviction if she's found guilty on this charge of aggravated assault with the firearm. Was it worth it? Was that outcome worth it? And that's always an outcome, folks. In fact, the outcome could have been worse, right? She could have presented her gun, and the shoplifter might have had a gun and shot her dead.
Now, for us empty-hand people are not always raining on your parade, even though I think some of them secretly like to. But they're not always necessarily raining on your parade when they tell you, if you use your karate, because everything is karate to them. If you use your karate, somebody could shoot you. That's true, though. You're walking around with your empty hand techniques, and this person that you're trying to whatever has a gun. I think they may have an advantage.
So anytime you get into these physical confrontations, there's suddenly you're subject to at least two risks that you weren't being subject to before. One of them is a risk of death in the physical confrontation, right? And I don't care how good you are with a gun or a knife or your hands or whatever. The risk of dying in the fight's always more than zero. We develop these defensive skills to reduce that risk as close to zero as possible, but it's always more than zero. And the risk of going to jail for the rest of your life is suddenly more than zero, or at least very lengthy portions of the remainder of your life. Before, your risk of going to prison was nothing because you weren't engaged in physical confrontation with anybody. The moment you get engaged, your risk of going to prison, perhaps for very long periods of time, perhaps the rest of your life, it may not be high, but it's more than zero. It exists. So what's worth incurring those two risks, the risks of death and the risks of life in prison? Is stopping a shoplifter or someone else's goods worth that risk? Now, maybe it is to you, and that's fine. I'm not making a moral judgment here. I don't tell other people what to do. I don't tell other people when to use force and not use force. I can only advise people as to the likely legal consequences of using force under particular sets of circumstances, and let them make a hopefully well-informed decision about what's worth it to them. I expect that this woman had never before thought through these possible outcomes of her decision to intervene in a shoplifting until now she's facing those risks in real life.
There's another part of the video where he talks about how these days there are witnesses and there are cameras everywhere, so you also have to think about how things look. Ironically, this is why I think the idea that a lot of people who learned martial arts when I first learned them back in like the 70s, 80s, the idea that we were given of there is no first strike in the martial arts, particularly because I did take karate. So maybe that's why some people are telling me you're karate, because I did actually take karate at one point. They say there is no first strike in karate, right? Or whether you're doing taekwondo or karate or whatever, if you're doing a form, an empty hand pattern, you're taught initially that your first move is defensive. And then later on, you learn that no, every movement has some type of offensive use or application if you use your imagination, or you study how the body works. Every single move can be offensive, right? It can be an attack. Like there are no blocks, crowd. There's only parries and even blocks or strikes. But if you take that approach to where even if someone is coming after you, if your first move in self-defense is to be defensive and to try to avoid the attack or parry the attack or neutralize the attack without hurting the person, if that's possible, if this is self-defense and not, war zone combat, that is going to look a lot better for you, in my opinion. So that's why the way we teach one-step sparring, where we say you block first, then you hit, then you throw, then you do one hit on the ground. That stop approach is great and it's better, especially when we're talking about use of force, in my opinion, because I think that's what's going to make you look better. And, a lot of people come to this channel and they'll say, I don't care how I look defending myself. I'm just going to defend myself. That's fine. But you got to think about stuff like what the attorney is saying here that I'm referencing. Think about what people like that are telling you. First of all, don't get it twisted, okay? If your life's in danger, you got to do whatever you need to do to protect your life, okay? If your life's in danger, even if you're going to be judged by people, fine, but you're alive to fight the battle. But some of the things that we get into is not necessarily life or death. Like the woman he's referencing in his video, she was stopping a shoplifter. That's not life or death. That's not worth you risking you shoot someone, or if you're empty hand, stopping a shoplifter. If they're not shoplifting and kidnapping a child, it's not worth a roundhouse kick or an ippon throw or a strong reverse punch or a hook and an uppercut to the gut where you could possibly kill the person, or you could possibly get shot or stabbed. It is just not worth it. It's not. Now, he doesn't make moral judgments. He's not telling you what to do. If I'm your instructor, I'm telling you what to do. Okay? If you're taking lessons from me, or you have taken lessons from me, I'm telling you, please try not to do anything unless you are preventing harm to yourself or someone else. Preservation of life and limb of body, that's it. Not preservation of ego. And that means if somebody's coming at you with a barrage of haymakers, and all you do is quote unquote block or dodge, do that. If all you do is take them to the ground and hold them in a pen until they get tired, do that if you can do that. Now, if in the process of taking them down and trying to hold them down because you don't want to hurt them, you see or feel they pull a knife, that's different. That's different. They're escalating to deadly force. Don't escalate to deadly force unless they escalate to deadly force. And you still have to consider who it is, because what if you're trying to hold down some 85-year-old grandma and 85-year-old grandma pulls a knife? 85-year-old grandma can still kill you with that knife because it's still a knife. But, people want to judge you. Just know I got to defend my life here and just accept the fact that I want to have a battle, because even though this woman could have carved me up like I'm a turkey, they're still going to feel sorry for her because it's 85-year-old grandma. You understand what I'm saying? Now, in this last part that I'm going to reference, he's talking about what happens when people contact him from jail after they've been arrested for the use of force and then they find out about his material. Let's take a look.
Physical book, folks. It's a couple hundred pages plus in length. If you'd be interested in getting a free copy of that book, you can get that at lawofselfdefense.com/free book. Very easy to remember, free book, one word. And they write us, and basically they describe all the things they think are relevant to their use of force event, and they're bewildered that they're being prosecuted, that they're in prison, that they've been convicted, that they're going to spend the next 10 years in a cage with unpleasant people. And what they end their letters with almost invariably is, having read your book or whatever content they accessed, I wish I knew then what I know now. And it almost makes you want to cry, because the information, like I say, we give much of it away for free. And they just didn't know then. And because they didn't know then, they're living in a cage. That does not have to happen, folks. None of this stuff is rocket science. Again, I'll mention those 5 elements of self-defense: innocence, imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. There's not 500 of them, folks. There's not 50. There's only 5. But you have to know the 5. And you have to constrain your use of defensive force within those required elements, or what you did was simply not lawful self-defense. It was simply a criminal use of force against another human being. And that's not where you want to be.
We talk about in Taekwondo the tenets of courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. I think a lot of people just want to have the indomitable spirit. And they don't want to have the self-control or the courtesy. They just want that indomitable fighting spirit. And from judo, we talk about mutual welfare and benefit, and maximum efficiency, minimum effort. I think a lot of people just want the maximum efficiency, minimum effort, or they just want the minimum effort. They don't want the mutual welfare and benefit. Most of you watching this video, most of you who will ever take a class from me, you are civilians. You're not soldiers. And I don't care if you're taking Krav Maga from somebody fatigues. Most of us who are into the martial arts, at least in the United States, we're not cops or soldiers. The vast majority of us are civilians who don't have police powers. And those of you who happen to fall in my primary ethnic group, you know that the law may not want you to respond like it may allow other people to respond. And this is not about me trying to say I hate this or I want to paint that. I'm just speaking reality. You've got to think about who you are when you are defending yourself. You've got to think about who the person is that's attacking you when you are defending yourself. You've got to think about all that. And if you don't think about all that, and you can't think about all that under pressure, if you train in the traditional way, where no matter what, I'm going to block first, let me see what happens. But doing that, to reset, that actually buys you some time to get some of that reason going. I mean, come on. Nobody's ever snuck up behind you and spooked you, and you turn around, you're getting ready to hit, but because you were taught to look first when you're doing forms, you stop and look, and then you realize, oh man, they're just trying to bring me my hat. You see what I'm saying? If we actually do some of this stuff classically, and not try to throw away what a lot of people would call the classical mess. You know who I'm referencing there. And no, I don't hate him. He's one of my favorites too. If you would keep that classical mess can keep you out of a real legal mess. You understand what I'm saying? Thanks for watching this video. Like, comment, and subscribe. Please share with people who like to talk about the martial arts in peace. As always, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And get Andrew Branca's book. I got it. It's going to go. You're going to realize you've been living in a dream world, Neo. Peace.